This video is going to contain spoilers for the Raimi Spider-Man trilogy and also some of the MCU. Not all of it, not most of it, but some of it. A problem I have with some fans of comic book movies is that they seem to have this almost knee-jerk negative or otherwise disillusioned reaction to the possibility of using a villain more than once. And I said in a lot of ways they're kind of like the reverse version of horror movie fans, where like horror movie fans will get mad if we get the same protagonist repeatedly. And then the comic book movie fans will get mad if you use the same villain more than one time. Even though in the acclaimed MCU, or at least the previously acclaimed MCU, it was generally agreed upon that most of the villains, with the exception of like two, three, four, five of them across 22 movies, were the worst aspects of their respective films. And I don't know if it's like a mixture of fans being casual and not a majority of us being writers, but I just kind of look at things and I see how it's developed and if it can go any further. So Doc Ock, the Raimi version, was first introduced in 2004's Spider-Man 2, and Alfred Molina expressed interest in reprising his role during the Amazing Spider-Man series, which ended up not even having a Doc Ock in it, and then ultimately would play the character again 17 years later in Spider-Man No Way Home. The MCU is going to presumably, we've been told it's going to be a trilogy, but right now we only have one movie confirmed, but presumably we're going to get a full second Tom Holland Spider-Man trilogy, as well as appearances by his iteration of Spider-Man in Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars. So this means that by the time Tom Holland, and I guess, I don't know if, I'm not going to say he's going to just retire and then we'll get, Miles Morales, but maybe the MCU gets rebooted. But this means that at a minimum, by the time Tom Holland is done playing Spider-Man, he will have appeared in over 10 movies. Which I'm not necessarily against, but when I hear that, I'm like, okay, well, maybe, with almost a dozen live action appearances by the hero, it wouldn't be too awful to have one of the villains show up more than once. Because his iteration of Spider-Man really does not have an archenemy. I know people are saying it's the Goblin for murdering May, but let's be real. When people think of archenemy, it's usually someone that the hero sees repeatedly. This is why people don't say, for example, Red Skull is Captain America's archenemy in the MCU, because after he enters the present time following the first Captain America, they have nothing to do with each other anymore. No screen time together. We don't even see Red Skull again until Endgame. So, when I say, I should also mention Infinity War, but my point I'm making here is that I wish people were just a little bit more open when it came to using a character, an antagonist, a protagonist more than once. Now, we don't know that much about Brand New Day, the fourth MCU Spider-Man film. We know that Scorpion's going to be in it, Punisher's going to be in it, Hulk is going to be in it. But if we're getting two more movies, I think it would be extremely interesting if they took the Doc Ock from No Way Home, who survived and was cured of his impairment that made him evil, right? The tentacles taken over. I would find it extremely interesting if, let's say the villain of the fifth movie is Lizard, just as, and I know they probably wouldn't do him because they've already, they're going to use the excuse of we already had the TASM Lizard, who people didn't even like that much anyway. But let's just pretend, for example, it's Spider-Man versus the Lizard, and he's trying to defeat him, but he's like so powerful and he's got all this self-doubt. What better character to bring along to assist him, not even in like some, main role, but just like a supporting character, probably has like 3, 4, 5 scenes in the movie. What better character to play the mentor type role to him than a reformed Doc Ock? To have Molina's version of the character say, hey, when my wife died, I thought that I was done for, but you can't just quit because there's this obstacle that's in your way. You have to find some way around it and to, persevere. And, through your help, I was able to return to some semblance of happiness, even if she's no longer there, just to kind of serve as a connective tissue to No Way Home. Because as far as I can tell, Brand New Day is trying to start a whole new continuity in the sense of all his friends don't remember him, all the villains don't remember him, but just having that appearance, which could still be achieved through whatever events might transpire in Secret Wars. They might reboot the entire series. They might have that wish undone. I'm just extremely doubtful that we're gonna just have Zendaya, married to Tom Holland, but never sharing any screen time with him in a romantic capacity after No Way Home. I just don't buy it. So eventually, whether this happens before the 5th or 6th film, they're going to undo that part of No Way Home where everyone forgot he was Peter. And when that happens and we get a plot where he's up against one of his rogues, I think it'd be extremely interesting to have a reformed villain help him with fighting that antagonist. Also, and I wasn't even thinking about this earlier, if they're really going to go down the route of just every single antagonist that's been in a Spider-Man movie cannot be introduced in the MCU proper, like we have to pretend there's only one version of Norman Osborn and, just etc., they could use the Olivia Octavius version of Doc Ock from Spider-Verse and have her be the MCU Ock, where she would maybe, let's say, have some plot having to do with science and something destructive, right, that Spider-Man has to take out or stop, and maybe he can't defeat her by himself, and then we can have one good Doc Ock versus one evil Doc Ock. But you get that's just another example where I can't imagine if you're going to have a character who is older than Peter, who has a similar interest in science, right, reformed, have this arc between Spider-Man 2 and No Way Home, and just never use them again. That doesn't make any sense to me. Now, if we move over to Secret Wars, which is apparently going to be the big, for real this time, grand finale of the MCU, that's another space where Ock could be used. Now, I would prefer that he's in a Spider-Man movie, because I think the way Doomsday is looking, they're going to have like 40 or 50 or 60 characters in that thing. It's going to be a big toy box of every actor who's ever been in a Marvel movie, at least the protagonist anyway. But I think it would be so cool if they had some kind of association between Doc Ock and, any of the iterations of Spider-Man. We still, this is the problem that I had with No Way Home. They didn't give him a chance to interact with the TASM version of the character, the Andrew Garfield one, and I thought that was an extremely missed opportunity, because they have both lost the woman that they were in love with, right? This version of Doc Ock lost his wife, and then that version of Peter lost Gwen. It's I don't know, it just seems like that's the kind of material that even if it's not the center focus of a movie, it still would be memorable and like actually be something worth seeing. Those like similarities between the heroes and their former antagonist. Also, we did get a brief taste of Ock versus Goblin during the last act of No Way Home, right, where he tries to stop him and then the pumpkin bomb just rips off one of the tentacles. It would be so great to see some furtherance of that. Like, I'm not going to say some full scale battle, but just like, something that kind of picks up where that left off. If they were both in Secret Wars, again, one as a redeemed villain and the other one just still pure evil, or some other variant that could have gotten away. But really, it's kind of been interesting just in general to watch the MCU over the last 4 years, because there's been a real breadth of content with regard to like it's not surprising that the fate of a lot of the different villains are in limbo. Putting aside the fact that this is a series that really despises its own antagonist, but then when you also factor in that even the supposed protagonists are really not showing up that often. Like look at Captain America, or, Sam Wilson. Uh, Supposedly the new one of the new leaders of the flagship team of this franchise, but he's only had 2 appearances in the last 4 years. One was in a movie this year, and then one was a TV show 3 years ago. So just stuff like that is what's so wild to me, and it would be extremely unfortunate if the MCU were to end and we were to just completely do away with everything that's happened up to this point and have 3 more Spider-Man movies, as well as a big film possibly that has all the different villains that have ever played some major role in the last 20 years of comic movies, and just not use Doc Ock at all. I think that would be one of the stupidest things Marvel ever does or doesn't do. But given the downward spiral of their, flagship series, the cinematic universe, I wouldn't be too surprised. So I don't know if he'll appear again, but I think he should, and there's multiple ways in which it would benefit the stories to have a third Doc Ock appearance.